Go ahead and get started. Daniel. Let me know when we're live. Good. All right, good morning everyone. It's Thursday, March 24th, 2022, and this is the regular meeting of the California Fair Political Practices Commission. So would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Here. Commissioner Wood?
Here, and you're echoing.
Chair Manage?
Here. Good morning, everyone. We'll proceed with item number 1, public comment for items not on today's agenda. Do we have any public comment?
This is Henry Kresak from San Simeon.
Good morning, Mr. Kresak.
Morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
All right, I'm still getting older, which I think is a good thing. Focusing on my written comments, basically, that I submitted yesterday. And it's related to its follow-on and a bit of an update for the Charles Gray Section 1090 violation that the Commission approved in November. There were 4 points I made in some requests. One is that the district ended up paying, at the demand of Grace's attorneys, his FPPC-related legal fees of almost $50,000 at their March 8th board meeting. His attorneys had demanded it under the indemnification clause of his agreement at the time. There was no mention made of voiding his contract in the agenda items for that meeting. You can see in item number 2 in my letter, there were public announcements made by Chair Kellis regarding the violation itself, focusing on the fact that it was inadvertent and really that that they were absolutely sure there was no harm done to the district, and that this truly, in some of the directors, at least 3 of the directors' minds, was really not anything that was done improper here. So that's kind of the message that I put in my letter. So you can see, and that's probably the tamest of the messages. I have to be a little careful what I say today and what I wrote in here. I may have pushed it a little bit, but the third item in my letter was that our chair, being the chair of San Simeon CSD, has now threatened or is looking into legal action against myself and another complainant for frivolous complaints, and to recover those and more legal fees associated with the complaints that were filed with the FPPC. There's still the large district attorney's civil lawsuit that's ongoing that may also incur more legal charges. But the statement that she made of actually suing critics of the district and recovering legal costs that have been paid, including the general manager's legal fees associated with the FPPC complaints, are certainly chilling. I mean, I really have to be careful about what I'm saying, and I will not be speaking on certain matters that I would like to today because of the SSCSD's threatening statements and other statements made by the San Simeon CSD general manager and his attorneys, and now with SSCSD being a San Simeon CSD funding to intimidate and interfere with my rights to criticize my government.
Mr. Kursak, your time is expired, but I'll give you another 15 seconds to conclude your remarks, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, I did request that there possibly be a letter sent to the district clarifying that the district attorney opened that case with the FPPC. I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
You have my letter.
Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional public comment for items not on today's agenda? Hearing and seeing none, let me pause and actually ask Executive Director West, apropos of the public commenter's point about clarifying that the complaint came from the district attorney's office and not from a private citizen. Is that something, can you refresh my memory, is that reflected clearly in our stipulation?
I don't recall, but I can look into it.
All right, if it's not, would it be appropriate for us to send a letter clarifying that to the San Simeon so that at least the public record there is clear on that matter?
We could clarify who the complainant was.
Okay, I think that would be wise to do. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and proceed at this time to item number 2. Today we will be joined by Marjorie Hyder. She is the Acting Division Chief for the Political Reform Division at the Secretary of State's Office, and Ms. Hyder will be providing an update on the Cal Access Replacement System. Morning, Ms. Hyder.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Matich. Good morning to commissioners, and good morning to meeting attendees. Thank you for the opportunity for us to present an update on the Cal Access system. With me today is Taylor Kayada. He is from the Political Reform Division also, and he represents the legal interests of the Political Reform Division and is very knowledgeable about the project. So I am ready to share my presentation if whenever it is ready to go. Okay, thank you. Okay. And there we go. Okay. This morning, what I will be sharing with you, one moment. I think we're just having a little bit of a delay here. Okay. Thank you. This morning, I will be sharing with you the Secretary's decision regarding the Cal Access system. And I'll provide just a very brief background on where we got to where we are today, why we got to where we are today, some of the issues that were encountered as we were developing the system, and most importantly, the actions that we have taken and how we're moving forward. At the end of the presentation, I have allowed some time for questions as I do a wrap up. So when the decision was made to pause and evaluate the Cal Access system, that was done as a way to allow the Secretary to get an unbiased look at Cal Access and to get that unbiased look from a fresh perspective. And keeping in mind that the Secretary's goal is when the system is released, that it is released being a high quality system and bringing low risk to anybody that uses the system, as well as to the Secretary of State office. We recognize that this system is rather complex. And so with that being the case, based on the information that was contained in the independent assessment report, and I'll provide more detail of what that was in just a few slides, as well as taking into account information that the Secretary received from both internal and external stakeholders. The Secretary decided to accept the recommendations that were identified in the report and to use the estimates that the report provided as a baseline starting point as we move forward with the project. And so the report provided estimates for budget, staffing, and resources needed. It did not take into account the operational requirements of the Secretary of State. So as we are estimating time and effort to move forward, we will, of course, be taking into account our operational requirements. As we move forward, we'll be viewing the project as a new project, and we will be going through the project acceptance lifecycle process and working in collaboration with California Department of Technology. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It is very hard to see these buttons on the white background, and I'm trying to go forward on the slide deck. I apologize. I'm going the wrong way. Oh. There we go. Thank you. One more. Okay. One more. Thank you. Just as a very brief reminder, as we were going through implementation for the project, we did encounter some problems along the way, and we have had 2 attempts at implementing. So with this latest implementation, some of the problems that we had were resulting from the fact that we had a very short timeline to get the system up and running. And so what happened as a result to meet that shortened project schedule was there were multiple development streams developed or put into place, as well as multiple people were added to the project. And what happened as a result of trying to condense and compress that project schedule is what we found was that we had a lot of issues identified in the areas of usability, security, data migration, and testing. These were issues that were identified as we were going through the system, but as we were going through the implementation, but the process continued. We know that Cal Access is mission critical. It's our legacy system. We know it's been in development for years, and we also know that as a result of the independent assessment, they verified and confirmed for us that it is a very complex system. It is simply not a form system. They identified it as having unique business rules that would be similar to the Franchise Tax Board or some type of a tax system. So we also know that as we're moving forward to create the Cal Access system, that it must be truly an interactive solution for both the campaign and the lobbying filing community. Okay, I am going the wrong way. I apologize. Yeah, you would think that this is not that technically difficult. So here we go.
Doing fine, don't worry. You're doing fine.
Yeah. So as we were going through the process and the secretary determined that we would have a pause and evaluate, what that decision was based on, as I mentioned earlier, it was a way to help us make sure that we were increasing the quality of the project as well as reducing any risk to the secretary and to users. So as we were doing that pause and evaluate, we identified some tasks that could continue to be developed, and those were the tasks that were thought to continue to add development or value to the project, depending on what the outcome would be of the independent assessment. We would likely be able to make use of those activities. So those included tasks like data migration, continuing work with the software vendor community, continuing to do regression testing, ADA testing, and of course doing our own lessons learned, so we could be identifying what went wrong previously and the steps we could take to correct that moving forward. The bigger part of what we did in that pause and evaluate was we partnered with California Department of Technology to do the independent assessment. And the purpose of that was to determine the readiness to launch the system while reducing risk and increasing quality. As part of that partnering with CDT, we created an RFO. We went out to bid, and Elion Strategies was the vendor selected to do the independent assessment. They're experienced in doing this type of assessment. We're not the first state agency that they have worked with or done this type of an assessment for. When they came to us, they brought a team of technical, IT specific, and strategic experience. It's important to know that CDT and Secretary of State guided the assessment, but the Elion team conducted the assessment. We were very diligent throughout the process to maintain the independence of that assessment. As Elion was doing the assessment, they delivered to us reports. They came in 3 phases. We received a preliminary report, a final report, and some recommendations that included the estimates to go forward. All of the reports that were delivered to us on time, and they met the purpose of doing the assessment in the first place. The basic information that was reported to us was that there needed to be a re-examination of the architecture, and that as we move forward, whatever the solution is, it has to fit the architecture that has been selected. We need to do a new acquisition. Basically, they said we need to start over. They also indicated that SOS internally, we need to take a look at many of our processes and make some changes. So those changes that they recommended we make are based on best practices that other state agencies have implemented. So these are best practices, and these are the practices that have led to a successful completion of a project. As Elion was giving us their final recommendations, they handed off instruction to us in the final document they provided. It was the estimates of time, resources, that kind of thing. And those basically are the pieces of information that we need to create a remediation plan. The remediation plan is basically our go forward strategy. It's how do we bridge the gap from what we did previously to moving forward to getting to that successful project launch. And part of that is providing us with those estimates, the rough order of estimates that we then have to coordinate with our own business processes. We needed to wait until we got the final report because that's where all of the detail was. So we received that information at the end of December. And so as a result of getting that, we've been starting to look at that information and also determine how do we move forward from there. I mentioned Elion suggested we need to look at some processes within SOS. And basically these processes hit most of the project management processes that would occur for a project. We can categorize them in three main categories of planning and infrastructure, data quality, and quality. And so those are, in fact, the things that we are starting to look at now. When it comes to Elion's suggestions regarding the schedule, what they are suggesting to us is that the planning and acquisition process will take approximately 10 months. And I just want to clarify again that that's 10 months once we get into the planning process. We're not even there yet. So we're still in the process of what we're calling pre-planning, and that's identifying those actions we need to take internally to prepare for the project to start again. They're estimating that the design and build and deployment process, once we get a system integrator on board, will take approximately 27 months. And again, as I've said several times, we will take those estimates and apply them to our own operational needs. When it comes to staffing, the Elion report indicated the importance of having certain and specific resources on board throughout the project. So skill sets such as independent verification and validation, making sure we have sufficient project management staff, organizational change management, as well as very strong testing support. All of those were areas that we recognized we were not fully staffed with during the last iteration of the project. So as we move forward, we're looking at the recommendations given to us by Elion, and we are looking forward from the perspective of how do we move forward and plan for success. And so to do that, what we're doing is we're starting from the very beginning. We're creating our plan. Right now we are pre-planning. And those again are the activities that were excluded from Elion's estimates to us. We are partnering with CDT again. We have already created a memorandum of understanding with them. They're going to provide both advisory and oversight partnerships with us. And we will be working to augment our own internal skill set to make sure that we have sufficient skill set to do the things that need to be done throughout the project. Again, as we're moving forward, we'll take all of those recommendations that Elion gave us in terms of time frame and apply them to our operational needs to make sure that when we create our schedule, it's realistic and it takes into account things that are happening within Secretary of State. things such as recognizing that 2022 is an election year. We'll continue to update all of our procurement, all of the processes that we use. Basically, we will be creating a very firm foundation before we actually start doing the project. I mentioned a few moments ago, we've already created the MOU with CDT. They are already on board. They're already working with us from an advisory perspective. We're in the process now of creating the remediation plan, which really becomes the backbone of follow-on actions that we need to take for the project, like creating a statement of work to bring on contractor staff, of creating our project charter and our governance structure. So as we're looking at the project moving forward, we've identified it as having three main phases: pre-planning, planning, and execution. And pre-planning is where we are right now. The planning that's the formal execution of the project approval lifecycle, which we will be doing with CDT. That's the time when we'll be taking a closer look at our requirements, our business rules, our business processes, that kind of thing. We'll be baselining the project and then creating more firm timelines for moving forward. And then execution is when we actually will have the system integrator on board, and we'll start to do the design, develop, and implementation of the solution. So when we think about, so what's next? We have had some external communications with our software vendor community and with some of our external partners. We want to make sure that everybody is now up to speed and up to date on our plan to move forward. We are making the independent assessment report available to both internal and external stakeholders, and that information is found on the Secretariat website. There's a link at the very end of this slide deck to the location of that independent assessment report. We'll officially close out the previous iteration of the CARS project so we can move forward. We'll continue with our pre-planning activities and submit our RFO to acquire those vendor staff we need right now to help us move into our planning activities. What we have found as a result of going through this independent assessment is that the findings they provided to us are consistent with the concerns that were raised through the project and with having that unrealistic project schedule. And so now what we find is it's really time for us to move forward and to do the activities we need to do to be able to move forward to a successful launch. We feel the pause and evaluate was a good decision, and that we do think that following the recommendations that were given to us, that does create the best opportunity for us to reduce risk and to achieve high quality results. And I want to just make sure everybody's aware that the independent assessment team, they feel we can get to a successful launch, that if we follow their recommendations, that we should be able to get there. We're very aware of the importance of doing project planning. Again, feeling that partnering with CDT is one of those big steps that will help us reduce risk to the project, and that we have very strong support from the Secretary of State executive level, from the Secretary herself, from CDT, that combined with the lessons learned activity that we have done, with the recommendations that we have from LAON and that we plan to implement, we feel that, that we can be very successful in launching the CARS project. And that's the end of this presentation. It was difficult to get it going, but we made it through. So thank you for your patience in me being able to see these buttons to push the right one. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thanks, Ms. Hyder. Commissioner Wilson, any questions?
I do, but I'll just defer to Commissioner Wood if she wants to.
Commissioner
ask
Wood,
any questions.
any questions for Ms. Hyder?
I'm all set. I really appreciated the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Wilson?
so, and correct me if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, Ms. Hyder.
Hyder.
Thank you very much for your, thank you for the presentation. But just for a timeline perspective, in your presentation, which was very informative, it's my understanding that you said that the rollout date is scheduled for approximately 27 months.
So what the Elion report, what their estimation is that once we get to the actual part where we have a system integrator on board, so the design, build, and deployment, they estimate that that would take about 27 months. That would be
All right, so-
after the planning process occurs.
After the 10 months. So I appreciate, your hard work on this and the secretary taking the lead. And I don't remember all the particulars, but it's my understanding that the CARS program is a follow-up to implement a bill by Senator Hertzberg back during the 2017-2018 session. Is that pretty much correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So this has been an ongoing issue, and you obviously, with the leadership of the secretary, are addressing these issues. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further, Commissioner Wilson? All right. Ms. Hyder, again, I want to thank you very much for the presentation and giving us the update. And I agree with Commissioner Wilson. This is important. And I think, as you've said, pausing, reevaluating, making sure we get this right is absolutely the right thing to do. I guess my question / recommendation would be, if we could get from you some assurance that we're going to be able to have some input, both from the standpoint of the commission. As you know, we adopt regulations, they change. The legislature adopts new requirements under the act, which we then have to perhaps adopt additional regulations, implement, enforce, et cetera. So the act is evolving constantly. And in addition to that, we have external stakeholders who are trying to comply with the act. They're trying to get the information filed in a timely fashion. And it just seems to me that we need to have a pretty big table of folks who are putting their minds together to ensure that whatever architecture is agreed upon, that we then build out, satisfies the needs of everybody, including having a data-driven system, having something that's flexible for future changes, et cetera. So do you have any thoughts that you could share with us? It's okay if you don't. I know you're still not in the pre-planning phase yet, but just some type of an understanding of how we can accomplish that type of interaction together.
I agree. I agree with what you are saying, that we need to have many heads at the table, and it has to be a big table. And we need to make sure that we are incorporating the needs of the multiple people that need to use the system. So one of the things that will occur during the planning process is we do have to do a review of our requirements and the business rules. So these were the business rules and the requirements that we have, those were developed like in 2016, 2017. So I think it's not realistic to think that they are fully complete today. And, the process that was used then, it will be different than the process used now to go back and make sure that we're interacting with our partners again, and to make sure that we are capturing everybody's needs. So I can say that that is something that we recognize must be done as we move forward.
Appreciate that very much. Anything further? All right. Ms. Hyder, thank you very much. Mr. Chiata, thank you as well, and look forward to continuing our partnership with you guys.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and proceed with our agenda. We're now on item 3, approval. Yeah, we can. I thought it was just. Let's go ahead and call for public comment on item 2. That's the update on the Cal Access replacement system. Hearing and seeing none, we will now proceed to item 3. The approval of the February 2022 Commission hearing minutes. Do any commissioners have edits or comments on the meeting minutes?
I saw a little typo. Oh,
All
sorry,
right,
Commissioner
Commissioner
Wilson,
Wood.
were you going? I'm sorry. Okay. Just on page 8, item 13, it says Commissioner Wood inquired about the several of the regulations and how the interest arises for the project. I think we don't need the before several, and probably not the before interest either. That's all. Otherwise, I'm cool with it.
Inquired about several of how the interest project.
Well, it says the several, right? And how
Right.
I guess the interest arises for the project is fine, but about the several of the regulations doesn't make sense.
Write the word the or the before several. Any other amendments? That want to recognize Commissioner Baker having joined us. Morning, Commissioner Baker.
Good morning, thank you.
Commissioner Wilson.
I move the adoption of the February minutes.
I will second. Is there any public comment on the meeting minutes? We're on item 3. Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Vo.
Commissioner Baker,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood,
Aye.
Chair Matich.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now proceed to our consent calendar. And today's consent calendar, there are 2 items. Items 4 and 5, both default proceedings. Do any commissioners wish to pull either item 4 or 5 from the consent calendar? And proceed with the consent calendar as is. Chief Brereton, did you have any comments before we proceed with the consent calendar?
No, I do not.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move the adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Public comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none. Mr. Vo?
Commissioner Baker,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wood,
Aye.
Chair Matich.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And proceed to our pre-notices of default. Item 6, in the matter of Friends of H. Fangari for Hermosa Beach City Council, 2013. Chief Brereton, anything you wish to bring to our attention on item 6?
We have not had any contact from the parties in that matter, so we intend to move forward with default as planned.
Commissioner, questions or comments on item 6? Reminder, this does not require any formal action from the commission on items. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I will now proceed to item 7, in the matter of committee to oppose Measure E and James R. Nyman.
The same comment as for the previous item. We intend to move forward with the default as planned.
Any commissioner questions or comments for Chief Brereton on item 7? Public comment on items 6 or 7 before we proceed. And seeing none, we look forward to your report in future months on those items, Chief Brereton.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now proceed to item 8, the first of our general items, and this is the In Re Liederman opinion. And with us, we have Commission Counsel Caitlin Green to present.
All right, good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Caitlin Green, Commission Counsel, Legal Division, presenting for Commission approval a draft of the In Re Liederman formal opinion, which addresses the reporting obligations of a committee that creates and sells non-fungible tokens, also known as NFTs, as a fundraising mechanism. At the February 2022 Commission meeting, the Commission approved staff's recommendation that the formal opinion conclude selling NFTs created by the committee is similar to selling tickets to a political fundraiser or offering a gift or incentive to make a contribution. And as a result, the full amount of the payment received by the committee must be reported as a contribution. In addition, this opinion has been posted and noticed for approximately 14 days, and we have not received any public comment on the opinion. So staff now presents the draft opinion and is requesting approval for its issuance today. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments on this.
Thank you, Ms. Green. If we approve the opinion today, when does it become?
It becomes effective upon adoption.
Okay. Any commissioners have questions or comments for?
Yeah, I have a general question, and thank you, Ms. Green, or Council Green, for your detailed, report and update. And you may not know the answer to this. This is just a general question. Do you know if there are any other states, for example, that have anything similar in terms of regulations governing NFTs?
So I have found that in Texas and New Jersey, they do consider payments received for these NFTs being sold by committees also as contributions. And that also aligns with the FEC, the federal regulations on the matter.
Thank you very much.
Additional questions or comments for Ms. Green? Right. I'll go ahead and move adoption. Ray Liederman opinion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I can second. Okay.
I defer to Commissioner Wood to second.
All right, Commissioner Wood gets a second. Is there any public comment on item 8? Seeing none, Mr. Vo?
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Wood?
Aye.
Chair Matich?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move on to our legislative update. For that, we will turn to our senior FPPC Legislative Counsel, Ms. Nakano. While Ms. Nakano is getting settled, consistent with our internal rules on disclosing ex parte contacts, I wanted to disclose that I did have a conversation with Richard Rios of the Remshow firm on the, I think it's Senator Newman's Bill 921, what we refer to as the DATA Act.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I also had a conversation with Mr. Bigelow regarding his bill. Mr. Bigelow's staff regarding his bill. And the bill number is skipping my mind, but it is one related to, got to remember which one it was, but it's toward the end of Ms. Nakano's memo.
Right, I know the one you're referring to. I believe it's AB 2528.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Baker. Morning, Ms. Nakano.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As of now, 4 new bills have been introduced this year containing the Commission's priority proposals, plus AB 775, which is a 2-year bill, bringing us to a total of 5 Commission-sponsored bills this year. For AB 775, and this is relating to automatic recurring contributions, staff sent a letter to Assemblymember Berman's office, as well as the Elections Committees, pursuant to the Commission's direction at the February Commission meeting. The letter reaffirms the Commission's support of the bill and the bill's goals generally, and encourages the legislature to move forward with that legislation as soon as possible this year. We are proposing some cleanup amendments to AB 775 and also amendments in response to feedback about concerns that the bill would inadvertently interfere with the ability of organizations to collect things like membership dues. We are proposing amendments that would exempt multi-purpose organizations from the bill, as we think this would address those concerns. AB 1798 by Assemblymember Bryan, making a minor change to a specific ad disclosure requirement, was heard in the Assembly Elections Committee yesterday. The bill passed on consent. AB 2172 by Assemblymember Cervantes was introduced on February 15th. The bill is currently a spot bill, but it will be amended with the Commission's proposal relating to the dual paper filing requirement under the Act. Staff has been in contact with the Secretary of State's office on the bill, and we may have subsequent amendments to ensure that the bill aligns with their procedures and current systems. SB 921 by Senator Newman, which would create publicly available digital records of digital campaign ads, was amended on March 16th. It'll be heard in the Senate Elections Committee on March 28th. The amendments were in response to feedback from stakeholders, including feedback about the deadlines for submission and concern about the increased burdens on committees. Specifically, the amendments impose the duty to submit information about the ads on platforms instead of committees. And these platforms under current law already maintain public records of these digital ads. The amendments also narrow the information that must be submitted about the ad to the information that the platforms are currently responsible for maintaining. Left out of that information was information about intended audience, and we received some feedback from the League of Women Voters of California, which submitted a letter of support for the bill, to add that component back into the bill, and we are discussing that option with the League and the author's office. The next one is SB 1483 by Assemblymember Glazier. This bill relates to the formerly named diversion program, and I'm pleased to announce that the new name of the program is the Political Reform Education Program, or PREP for short. The bill is also set for hearing in the Senate Elections Committee this Monday, the 28th. Staff is considering minor cleanup amendments to the bill to require the filing officer to waive the $10 late reporting fee if a person completes the PREP course for that late reporting violation. We think this is consistent with the purpose of the program to create an alternative to an enforcement action and any penalties. Also, the Commission has previously asked about the fee amount for participation in the education program, and staff is tentatively considering $50 for SEI courses or Statement of Economic Interest courses and $100 for all other courses. I'll pause here for any comments or questions about Commission-sponsored bills.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Nakano on the Commission-sponsored bills? Mr. Baker?
Thank you. Regarding recurring contributions, I heard your mention of amendments that would exempt I think you said multi-purpose organizations. I wonder what other alternatives were looked at to maybe not exempt a entire organization, but just exempt perhaps membership dues as opposed to other more political contributions. Can you say a little bit more about what other options were looked at to address those concerns?
We did look at some other options, trying to narrow it a little bit more. However, we think that exempting multipurpose organizations still lets us get to the main types of committees that we see this issue, where we see this issue occurring with automatic recurring contributions. So we did go with a broader issue or a broader exemption, but we think this still gets to the purpose of the bill.
Okay. Thank you for that. For what those other options were, are they ones that, I guess I'm just kind of curious what the other options could be. I understand that the team looked at it, and I certainly appreciate that. But in an ideal world, maybe we aren't completely exempting not only very politically active organizations, but organizations completely from the provision if there's another narrower point of view. And I may be fully supportive of the language that we've landed on. I'm just curious a little bit more on what those other options might have been.
We looked at exempting particular types of organizations even narrower than multipurpose organizations. I don't think that staff looked into more specifically narrowing types of interactions between organizations and their members or things like that. So that's something that we can look into. It could be a tricky situation to define what kinds of those interactions should be exempt. But that's something that staff can look into a little bit more.
Can I just interject?
Please, yes, thank you.
I think I think it may be helpful, Ms. Nakano, if you can sort of make more concrete when we say multi-purpose organization, what do we mean from like a layperson standpoint? For example, I could be wrong, but like political parties are not MPOs, right? So a political party still would be subject to the bill, but an MPO is not. Ballot measure committee is not an MPO. It's going to be, right? It's like candidate committees are not MPOs. So when we're talking about not including MPOs, who are we really talking about? Can you put some gloss on that?
There's a very specific definition in the Political Reform Act, and I'd actually ask if our general counsel could provide some more detail on how that's defined.
Sure. Yeah, the section that Ms. Nakano is talking about is 84222 within the Act, and that defines what are multipurpose organizations. And what it would, I believe, I haven't looked at the legislation in the last go-round, but I believe what it would exempt are those organizations that are required to file reports as a committee because of their overall activity, not their specific activity that would qualify them as a committee in California. So it's a very complicated statute and concept, but what is a multi-purpose organization has a lot of activity specifically for California, they're going to qualify as a committee through the normal course as opposed to through this statute as a multi-purpose organization. So they would then not be exempt in that specific instance. Is that right, Ms. Nakano?
I think that's correct, but I will check to see what our draft language says on that.
So we're not excluding anything that qualifies as a multi-purpose organization in every way. It's just in this specific way that a multi-purpose organization may be required to file in California in limited circumstances.
You give us an example of that is an MPO, like specifically like Boys and Girls Club, like just, you know what I mean? Like, can we make this a little bit more concrete for the public?
Sure. So let's say a charitable organization. That's going to be a multi-purpose organization as it's understood under federal law. They may not be a multi-purpose organization for purposes of having to file under the Political Reform Act unless they meet some specific criteria for the amount of money they spend in California elections. So it wouldn't include that sort of, or they would be included in that situation. If it's a multi-purpose organization that happens to do a lot of activity in California that would qualify as a committee otherwise, then they would be a committee in the traditional sense, in which case I don't believe they're exempt from this legislation.
Okay, so just to, again, I'm trying to, I know this is very technical, so I'm just trying to make it easily digestible for the public. So if the Boys and Girls Club sponsor a ballot measure in California and they spend a bunch of money on it, they would be, under this bill, subject to the recurring contribution requirements that were imposed under the bill. But if the Boys and Girls Club did not do that, they would still be considered an MPO and they would not be subject to that. Is that about right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I just think it's helpful to make it a little more concrete. Commissioner Baker, sorry, I jumped in there.
No, that was a great anticipation of what was going to be more helpful to me was a concrete example. I think I'll try to get more concrete even because we had received concerns and opposition, maybe even opposition in prior reports from labor organizations that had expressed this. I feel like, and we may have even heard it from political parties. As the chair has mentioned, under this amendment, political parties would not be exempt. Can you address with labor organizations as their membership be completely exempt or just parts of them, as Mr. Bainbridge is saying? I'd like to know how it may apply to, say, a trade or public employee labor organization under the amendment you're considering, if you know enough of that yet. Thank you.
I think my understanding is similar to what Chair Matich stated, which is that if they qualify as a committee, otherwise they would be subject to the bill. But if they are just a multipurpose organization and are not otherwise qualified, they would not be subject.
Okay, I guess the reason I'm asking is they are very politically involved, and maybe they have separate accounts from which they engage in political activity. But if this if they don't qualify as a multipurpose organization, then even if they have political activity, would that render this bill applicable to them? And I'm sorry, it's kind of taking a thick skull to get that in there, but that's what I'm trying to understand, because they are a very politically active organization. There are others like them, but that's the first one that's coming to mind. And I just want to make sure I understand very clearly, if they're not a multipurpose organization, even if they have political activity with the funds that they raise, they would or would not be covered by this bill.
I think what could be helpful for me is hearing from the commission about what the commission wants to see exempt in the bill, more specific than multipurpose organizations.
Yeah, I think, at least my recollection was that the purpose of the bill was to very precisely try and target what we believe as a commission is an untoward fundraising tactic, for lack of a better term, whereby people were unwittingly signed up to multiple political contributions. Commissioner Baker has used an example of, I think she's talking about membership dues in labor organizations, in which case you're really talking about a private entity that is collecting membership dues from its members in that context. And so in that context alone, that would be, in my view at least, clearly outside the scope, just as it would with, take the Chamber of Commerce that has members who may be paying dues to the Chamber of Commerce. That activity in and of itself would not be subject to this requirement, because that's not a contribution. That's in the political sense, right? That's not campaign activity. But I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, if the Chamber of Commerce then opened up a political committee, let's say to sponsor a ballot measure, that political committee would be subject to the recurring contribution requirement. And so any fundraising by that political committee, which was set up by the chamber, would be subject. In the same way that if a labor organization set up a ballot measure committee to sponsor a ballot measure, that committee would be subject to recurring contribution. Is that correct?
Yeah, I agree with that. That is the purpose of the bill and what we have tried to narrow it to.
Okay, that's at least my understanding of what we sought to do and what we've tried to do in this bill. If other commissioners had. Commissioner Wood?
Commissioner Baker may want to finish her. Okay, so I think.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you made it too easy, Mr. Chair, because you said they're setting up these basically separate segregated funds, and I think what Commissioner Baker's trying to get at is, you get this annual notice from your union or from the Sierra Club or whatever you're a member of to re-up your membership. And then they may also want to run a campaign that goes directly into their general funds from which they'll be making some political expenditures. I think they're still, I mean, correct me, but I think after Citizens United, they can just do this out of their general treasury and they don't have to set up a separate segregated fund. But still, because they would be doing two different fundraising campaigns, one on membership dues and then one on some recurring, we want to run some ads in a ballot initiative campaign or whatever they're doing, that we would still be able to regulate the one without regulating the other. Right? So allow the recurring membership thing to happen, but the recurring political fundraising, we may want to regulate more tightly.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, that is what we're trying to do. I just think mechanically the way it works, Commissioner Wood, is they do open up a separate political committee. And I think part of that is because many of these organizations hold themselves out to be 501c3s, et cetera. So they have limitations on what they can do as that entity politically. And so then there is a separate political committee set up so that you can essentially do both.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Mr. Baker?
Get off mute. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Commissioner Wood and the chair have both gotten it exactly what I was trying to get at too, which is I agree that getting membership dues was not what we were really going after. From what we learned was potential area of abuse and transparency and free will and contributions. It's just, I wanted to make sure when I heard a description that we're exempting a type of organization, that the brush is not painted too broadly, to use a metaphor, and that this can still bring within appropriate regulation of 775, basically fundraising for political campaign purposes, and in the ways that they're set up. So Ms. Nakano, Legislative Council Nakano asked, what's the feedback? That would be my feedback. I think it's consistent with the chair. But if it sounds like it's even more narrow, that was why I was asking, how narrow were we trying to make that language? So hopefully that's sufficient guidance, and thanks for teasing that out for me.
I don't know, is that clear as mud? I mean, I actually think we were pretty clear. I'm just kidding, but honestly, you get what we're saying.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And, as I said previously, I would commend Chair Matich and Vice Chair Baker for taking the lead, on this issue. One of the things you might want to consider, Ms. Nakano, is as you work with the author and the committee staff, is to kind of incorporate some of these examples into the committee analyses, and even if necessary, some legislative intent incorporated into the legislation. So if down the line there's some questions about what the actual intent is, it would be very clear. From the outset, I'm clear on what it is, and it was further expanded upon by, the commissioners on this, at the meeting today. But that's just one suggestion to consider, so that 2 or 3 years down the road, someone says, well, what was the actual intent? I think that intent is clear, and it can be reflected in the legislative record.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. Anything further for Ms. Nakano on the commission-sponsored bills? Please proceed, Ms. Nakano.
Thank you. Okay, there are 10 other commission-related bills that are active this year, 7 which were introduced after last month's commission meeting. One of those was added after this report, so it doesn't appear in the written report, but I'll briefly go over each of those 7 bills. AB 1783 by Assemblymember Levine, which was amended to include PRA-related content after this report was posted, would expand the definition of administrative action to include any policy or budgetary decision by a state agency, and this would expand what kinds of activities would be considered lobbying under the Act. I've reached out to the author's office for some additional background, but I've only received limited information so far, so I will keep the Commission posted on intent and other details as that comes in. Also note that this bill is keyed as a majority vote bill that will go to the voters for approval if passed by the legislature. AB 2528 by Assemblymember Bigelow, and I believe this is the bill that Commissioner Baker referenced earlier in the meeting, requires an elected officer's campaign statement, report, or document required pursuant to the Act that is not currently filed with the SOS to be filed with the SOS through their current online filing and disclosure system and with the future CAR system once it is certified. In addition to being filed with whoever the statement, report, or document is currently filed with under the Act, such as the elected officer's local filing officer. I wanted to clarify a previous comment I made at the Law and Policy meeting. The bill covers campaign statements and documents, not all statements and documents under the Act. AB 2544 by Assemblymember Mays. This is a PRA spot bill. However, based on previous conversations with the author's office, I believe this will ultimately be amended to be outside of the PRA. SB 1352 by Senator Allen revises the contribution reporting requirement for contributions received before the 90-day pre-election period. Currently, candidates for elective state office must report contributions of $5,000 or more within 10 business days if the contribution is received from a single source before the 90-day pre-election period. This bill would lower the threshold for purposes of reporting from $5,000 to $1,000 and would make the deadline for reporting 72 hours instead of 10 days. The bill would also extend these reporting requirements to committees primarily formed to support or oppose a candidate for elective state office. SB 1360, this is by Senator Umberg and Senator Allen, is similar to SB 752 by Senator Allen from last year. The bill would make changes to the disclosure requirements for political advertisements, including changes to the required form, content, and presentation of certain types of disclosures. The bill would also make changes in the elections code relating to initiative, referendum, and recall petitions, including by requiring new disclosure statements relating to top funders. SB 1362 by Senator Melendez was amended on March 16th and would apply the provisions of the Act that regulate lobbyists and lobbying to redistricting by the Citizens Redistricting Committee. And it would do this by expanding the definitions of administrative action and state agency to include redistricting and the Citizens Redistricting Commission, respectively. Last, SB 1439 by Senator Glazier applies certain disqualification rules and contribution limits to directly elected officials of local government agencies, and these officials are currently exempt from these rules. Additionally, the bill extends the amount of time that a party or participant is prohibited from making a contribution after a proceeding. It extends it from what is currently 3 months to 12 months from the date of the final decision. If an official unintentionally accepts an improper contribution after the proceeding, the bill allows the official to cure the violation by returning the contribution within 14 days. The bill also applies the contribution limits to contributions from a spouse of a party or participant if the contribution was made from a joint account. Last, the bill requires a party to submit a statement before the hearing disclosing any contributions or intent to make contributions to an agency official. Now, that concludes those summaries. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Nakano on the remainder? Thank you, Ms. Nakano. Appreciate your report. Is there any public comment on our legislative report? This is item 9. Hearing and seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Nakano.
Thank you.
All right, this time we'll proceed to item 10, our executive staff reports. And first up, I will welcome back our Chief of Enforcement, Ms. Brereton.
Hello again.
Hello. Anything you wish to highlight from your report?
No, thank you. It is as submitted today.
All right. Any questions or comments for Chief Brereton on her report?
Thank you.
Next, proceed to our Audits and Assistant Division Executive Staff Report. Unfortunately, our chief of that division, Ms. Shaw, was in training today, so she's unavailable, but with us in capable hands, we have Ms. Bonetti from our division.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. It's as submitted, and if anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you. Just so that my calendar is up to date, I have down that next month, Ms. Shaw will be presenting on the randomized audit process. I know that's something that came up last month of interest to commissioners, so we're still on track for that, right, Ms. Bonetti?
Correct.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to it. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Bonetti? None? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now turn to our legal division report. Mr. Bainbridge.
Quick update on the pending litigation, the first item in the report, the Wallstrom case. Since this report was printed, we had a ruling last week in a preliminary hearing where the judge granted our motion to have the case dismissed. So there's a little bit of paperwork left, but that case has been dismissed. So you probably won't see it again on the pending litigation, maybe just to say that it's finally wrapped up. And then there was one change you may have noticed if you're paying very close attention, that the regulation on cryptocurrency, we are going to consider changing our current regulation regarding accepting contributions via cryptocurrency. We got into it and decided we wanted to do some more research. So we've decided to put that off until we have a chance to do some additional research on some issues involving cryptocurrency. So hopefully we'll bring that back in the next month or two once we've had a chance to thoroughly research the issue. And with that, I'll submit.
Bainbridge, any questions for Mr. Bainbridge on the legal division report? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Bainbridge. Right along, Administration and Technology. Good morning, Ms. Hahn.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioner. I would just like to submit the report as is.
Questions or comments for Ms. Hahn? None. Thank you, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Executive Director West.
Also, I have no additional comments this month.
Right. Any questions or comments for Ms. West? Public comment on our executive staff reports. Seeing none. Proceeding to item 11, Commissioner comments, proposed future agenda items. Do any commissioners wish to express an interest in a future agenda item? Mr. Baker?
Thank you. And this may have come up at Law and Policy, and so it may go to Law and Policy first. It may come to the full commission. We had talked about our last meeting not bringing up items just by anecdote that you read about in the paper, but there was some news coverage about a way in which lobbying might be happening without being disclosed, and there might be a loophole there. And we had talked about at Law and Policy maybe bringing that, looking into what was happening there and if it was appropriate to address either by regulation or just get a handle from our perspective on what that is. I wanted to share that with all my colleagues who are here, and also just invite that again to be something that we'll be studying further this year. If my memory is as full as it should be about Law and Policy, and it may not be.
Commissioner Baker, you did a great job. Here's what I'd say. I agree. We did talk about that in Law and Policy. We are now past the deadline for ourselves to introduce, and taking a step back, Mr. Bainbridge, I think, did express to us that the issue of, and I believe the newspaper article you're referring to had to do with trying to influence the making of a contract before an administrative agency, that specific act is not embraced within the statutory definition of administrative action, which is subject to the lobbying disclosure requirements. So we would need to amend the statute. We cannot do anything by regulation on that issue, unfortunately. It's past the time to try and introduce a new bill for us this year on that issue. So it is something that we discussed having staff look into for a future legislative cycle. But not all hope is lost, because Ms. Nakano did report on a bill that I can't remember which number it was. But if you remember, she mentioned a bill that is key majority vote that would go to the voters. I believe that's the bill that would purport to amend the definition of administrative action in the PRA. Not quite to address the same issue that we have, but I believe Ms. Nakano has raised that issue, or will be raising that issue with that author's office, and we'll see where that could go this year.
Thank you. And that's good to, it just tied that loop, is knowing that that's what, I think that was Mr. Levine's bill. So yeah, thank you.
You're right. All right, any further comments under item 11? All right, hearing and seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Wilson, Mr. Vo.
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Commissioner Wood?
Aye.
Chair Matich?
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone. And a quick reminder to commissioners, I believe next month we're starting at 9 a.m. So don't forget, early start next month. Sorry, not sorry.
And an early day. I think we're meeting a day earlier than usual on a Wednesday.
That's right.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy times. Take care.
All right, take care, guys.